So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the single biggest factor when it comes to pricing most e-commerce businesses, which is pricing, and how to deliver customer loyalty through pricing. It's a great episode you don't want to miss, so do stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast. I'm your host Kunle Campbell, and this is a podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. And so if you are, essentially selling in the direct-to-consumer space, essentially you're tuned in to the right podcast, to the best of the best podcast in the direct-to-consumer space, if I have to say that. Now, if you work in marketing at an e-commerce business or a founder, I'm essentially going to help you sell more directly to your customers. And you know how we do it. We essentially interview an expert, a founder of a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business, or a representative from a best-in-class e-commerce, SaaS product. And their remit is essentially fine-tuned and focused to help you grow metrics such as conversions, average order value, repeat customers, your audience size, and ultimately sales. Speaking of which, today, we've been trying to talk about, I think I posted up on the Facebook, page about potential episodes, and we were talking about pricing. And I recall I was on the NetCore podcast. I was a guest on the NetCore podcast a few weeks ago, and we're talking about personalization in general. And one of the topics we talked about was we briefly talked about was personalized pricing, dynamic pricing essentially. And on today's episode, I have with me Cactus Raazi, and is here really to talk about just building out customer loyalty through pricing, through personalized pricing. We personalize a lot in e-commerce, but we never really have talked about personalizing, pricing, rewarding customers or setting prices, based on what you know about customers. And that's what Cactus is here to talk about now. A bit about Cactus. He is the founder and former CEO of Elefant Incorporated. Now, Elephant with an F, so instead of PH with an F, which is now part of Exos Financial. And they're focused on building smarter marketplaces through AI-powered pricing. Now, Cactus led Elefant to success, working with a brilliant team of engineers and marketplace experts, and they're pretty much focused on improving pricing transparency and efficiency in the bond market and in finance. And here he has written a book called Price. Right, I've gone through it. I haven't read the book, cover to cover, but I've actually scanned through it, and these are foundational principles that apply across industry. And in his book, he talks about the hotel industry, travel, a bit about e-commerce. And the reason I want him, the reason he's here on the show is to give us insights on becoming smarter prices, as e-commerce, people, as e-commerce businesses, as in retail. And I just find the whole topic on pricing very fascinating, because it's an opportunity to just maximize revenue on a one-to-one basis. And I'm just super excited to have Cactus on the show. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Cactus.
Thank you very much, Kunle. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Probably not done you sufficient justice, but could you give us a bit of background about yourself and what you're up to,
Sure.
right now?
Yeah, I'm a financial services professional and have actually been in sales since I was 15 years old. I'm 50 now, so I've been doing it for 35 years. The bulk of I spent time in a variety of industries, but the bulk of my career has been in financial services. And more recently, I started to use this. This is really right around 2013 and 2014 with the rise of big data. We started to apply sophisticated data analytics to pricing bonds, to buying and selling bonds as principal, and really thinking about these securities as as sort of an entity unto itself, where you gather a bunch of data and then spit out a price that's appropriate for a variety of conditions without getting too into too much detail. And and then about a couple of years ago, when I started to write the book, I wrote this book specifically because I saw there was a few different factors happening in the marketplace that are going to impact any e-commerce retailer. The first one, obviously, is the availability of data analytics, allowing us to use analytics to be much more thoughtful around portions of the customer experience, and my area of specialization is price. And the second element was this competitive threat of price transparency on the internet, of customized browser extensions that really troll the internet for lower prices when available, and thinking a little bit about how do we maximize the loyalty of our customer base in light of the opportunities presented by data analytics and the threats presented by sort of heavy discounting and deflationary pressure of the internet.
Super fascinating. So you think the internet is giving people too much empowering shoppers essentially, in a way where it suppresses pricing?
Yeah,
prices,
it's not even
in order to survive. It's commoditized.
Yeah, it's not even my thesis whatsoever. There are plenty of products out there already that do troll the internet for you on an automated basis. We see a lot of anecdotal evidence in brick and mortar that customers use their mobile phones to do sort of a real-time price check and make sure that they're, not every customer does this, but it's becoming increasingly common to use mobile commerce as a real-time price check. And so, although I realize that today's audience really is not worried about brick and mortar, there's plenty of examples out there that the availability of information via the internet is increasing price competition. This is a concept that needs to be thought about by all of your listeners as they try to map out their strategy for success.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start out with dynamic pricing. So our conversation earlier, when you explained what pretty much personalized pricing was, my verbiage in response to you is, it's dynamic pricing, and you made it very clear that dynamic pricing is different from personalized pricing. So should we
unpack that? Sure, just really briefly.
Unpack it.
Dynamic pricing is this notion that with different market conditions or different situations, you're going to have a variety of prices that could change daily, could even change on the minute or on the second. What dynamic pricing generally does not include is a component of who the customer is. So it may include generalized supply and demand or various other conditions, but generally dynamic pricing is not associated with pricing the customer. It's associated with pricing the market conditions. Personalized pricing, on the other hand, is a new concept that I am promoting in this book. It's not widely discussed, but it's really around who is your specific customer. That is to say, you need to identify this person in some way, and should your price reflect your customer relationship? And that is to say, to the degree that you're able to observe loyalty in your customer base, our suggestion is that either through a differentiated price or a differentiated experience, that you reward that loyalty and encourage that loyalty. So a lot of times people talk about pricing as a revenue maximization function. And what we're suggesting is to take a longer term view and think a lot more about loyalty maximization as being the function. Now, there's obviously a revenue component to loyalty by definition, but some of your guests have talked about customer lifetime value, and that is a concept that's becoming a lot more prevalent in today's discussions. My point would be the following: through most e-commerce sites, at some point the customer has to identify who they are. And at that point, you are able to recognize whether this is a repeat customer, what have they purchased in the past, whether their quote consumer behaviors are consistent with what you're trying to accomplish in your e-commerce business, and then provide that customer with a specific differentiated experience. The ultimate destination would be, if you have 250,000 customers, it's possible that you might end up with 250,000 prices. That's a little bit of, I think, a real stretch. But what you might want to start off with is, hey, I have two types of customers: first time on my site or repeat customer, and right off the bat, I'm just going to segment it that way, two segments, and then continue to segment additionally with to get increasing levels of personalization as my own analytics and my own understanding of my customers continues to deepen.
So would returning customers get things cheaper?
Yes, I think they would. I think they should. I don't think that has to be the answer. In certain businesses, there's plenty of other premiums you can give customers where you don't necessarily need to discount. But I also feel that most of your audience would agree that they're going to give their return customer something. It could be a points scheme or a loyalty scheme. It could be that they receive an email that says 15% off your next purchase once they do complete their initial purchase. There's many different things that most of your audience are already doing that presuppose a de facto discount.
Yeah. So it's essentially integrating smarter personalized marketing into existing loyalty programs. I think that's a very practical way of applying personalized pricing.
And it's really thinking about the price function as central to your marketing. And I think most of your audience would agree that in their personal lives, the fewer reward schemes they need to manage, the better they are. And in some senses, you simply want to cut to the chase, which is you're trying to please your customer by giving them, it could be some form of a loyalty or a reward scheme. I would propose just turn that into a price and move on. It's simpler for everybody. And in fact, so long as the differentiated price is not necessarily expected, it's actually psychologically delightful in a way that there's a lot of work out there about how discounting schemes reward certain brain parts of your brain and give you a little dopamine hit and whatnot. It's
the more random
that's
it is,
right. And that's exactly correct. And I feel that there's plenty of ways to do that with price, particularly in e-commerce, where the option to remain anonymous and sort of pay with cash and just disappear doesn't exist. At some point, you sort of have to identify yourself, and therein lies the beauty of this conversation.
Yeah. So I'm one of the companies that I'm advising for, or with, we're about to launch a membership program for their customers, for their best customers. So customers who purchase often just need to pay $100 per year, because the AOV for that brand is about $300 or so dollars. The CLV over 12 months average CLV is that 300 mark rather than AOV. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So their CLV, their 12-month CLV is about $300. So the ethos here, or the proposition here with the membership program, they already have a loyalty program, by the way, is that if customers pay an upfront fee of $100, flat fee of $100, they get 5% off all items and expedited shipping free. And obviously shipping is a big cost, because shipping is a minimum of $15 typically on their site, because they sell hazmat products. And so regardless of if they're running a sale, so if they're running a 20% sale, the 5% still applies, so that turns to 25%. But this membership program, which is like an Amazon Prime program essentially, is just addressing a segment, a hyper segment of not the average $300 spenders. These are like the $600 spenders, in the sense that they care more about the discounts. 5% is a lot more. Will go a lot further with $500-$600 of spend, or $1,000 of spend, as well as the savings with shipping, as compared to as compared to someone who's spending $200 or
Yes.
$300. And the initial proposition to the community was like, where do I sign? When so we're actually just setting up the technical bit of it. We're building it out, so they can manage their membership. But it's fascinating because price in this instance is a major motivator, and it's working for both sides of the equation, both the retailer where it's guaranteeing a certain amount of income, because that this 500 or so customers who have signed up will want to make use of their membership. So it's a guaranteed kind of like
Yep.
$500 from each of them in the next 12 months, essentially, and it does really add up. So yeah, what other sort of avenues would you think in the world of e-commerce can we, or rather, what other criteria besides returning, first time, and also this hyper loyal customers, can you sort of use price to lever marketing, essentially, a lot of your marketing efforts?
Well, generally speaking, I think that the first thing you're going to want to do is really be thoughtful around what customer data are you collecting? Are you collecting the customer information that's going to allow you to make decisions around your customer base, broadly speaking? Price is one component, but there are many other things. And I think that sometimes e-commerce businesses are in such a rush to grow and to really, expand revenue, and which is, of course, the name of the game. But we do want to be thoughtful about, are we collecting the right information to set ourselves up for success on a going forward basis? And are we being really thoughtful around how do we define our best customer? A simple definition of the best customer is one who's purchased the most goods might be sufficient. And frankly, it might be insufficient because there tends to be a lot of detail that's been hidden in just the top line revenue number. Could be shipping costs in some cases, could be margins in other obvious cases. It could be the number of returns relative to the amount of sales. There's a lot of different components, and you want to be really thoughtful around, am I collecting this information? Is it useful? Is it usable and accessible to me? And do I have a very clear definition of sort of what I would refer to as this archetypal best customer and acceptable customer, and how do we define a bad customer? And so now you have a very clear framework to say I have all the information that I need, and I have very clear definitions of my broader customer base from best to worst. And the next question becomes, what am I going to do to maximize the loyalty of the people that are in the best and better and acceptable category? Because that really is the foundation of my business. These are the people who have demonstrated some degree of loyalty or some sets of behaviors that I've defined as being central to success, my best customers. And from there, it really opens up the door to a lot of things. You've had many guests on your show talk about marketing programs or marketing schemes to this portion of your customer base. And what I'm proposing is also be thoughtful around providing customers with a differentiated price. I would argue that broad marketing schemes, such as a discount, an email that goes out to everyone who's purchased a certain item in the last year and says, great news, this item's now 25% off. Those tend to be generally value diminishing. And many of your guests have said you need to be much more personalized than that in your marketing for it to be effective. Otherwise, you're just sort of destroying brand value and perceptions of value without having the resulting sales. And I agree with those statements. So that next question would be, well, if we don't want to do a generalized marketing schemes where everyone gets a discount just because they happen to transact with us in the last year, what other things can we do? And my answer is to really be thoughtful around increasing levels of segmentation of your customers, defining which customers are the good, better, best, and then providing them a differentiated experience through the e-commerce process. That is to say, a price and potentially a premium of some sort. Premiums would be limited edition items that are available only to people who have purchased in the past. Some Again, specific to the use case, it may differ because there's a lot of different things out there that, in some cases, you can provide maybe a unique or a limited edition item. In other cases, it's not possible. But conceptually, one way to do it is provide a differentiated price, often lower, but not always. And another way would be a premium.
Even early access.
Yep.
So rather than having limited edition, you're about to launch a product, you give them exclusive access like 1 week
100%.
ahead. I buy like a hair product. They're a startup. They're less than a year old. They're just doing wonderful things in the hair space. And for their existing customers, they do this drops. And for existing customers, they have a pre-sale. So they send us an email at a particular date and say, okay, we're about to launch it. You guys have access to our stock. It's only limited for this period of time, and then we're going to open it to the world. So you get that feeling that, okay, these guys are actually treating me a bit special as compared to the mass market. They're thinking about me first to get my replenishment sorted. Obviously, there are other ways of doing it by just running a subscription, to be honest, and then setting up frequency. That's an easy way to automate things, to be honest. But they're small, nimble, and that's what they want to do. The other thing I wanted to sort of ask you about is how does personalized pricing work in the more luxury space? So I could see it perfectly working in more mass market products, but where there's this bit of exclusivity. And this is me just going way out, like an Aston Martin. People want to spend so much that they're not thinking about price. When it comes to an Aston Martin, it's really the status it gives you. So how do you address personalized pricing in different product categories based on on product types, essentially?
I think that's an excellent question, and you would make the argument that people are buying this specific luxury good or service based on sort of exclusivity. And if that's the case, then you perhaps the best way of impacting that customer's loyalty is by offering the thing that they seek, which is in fact that exclusivity. So just in your example, you used Aston Martin as the example, so I'm happy to run with that. My suggestion would be that rather than discount the vehicle, to say you the repeat customer, you the person that's now buying your second Aston Martin, qualify for a program where you're able to hand select certain elements, the stitching of the seats, perhaps a custom logo, perhaps a thing at the door sill that has your name on it. To where you feel like, hey, this is just amplifying the exclusivity which I seek in the first place. The car is reasonably rare, but guess what? I was given an option for a paint color that has it's given to one person per county, and I got that. Some these types of things that just amplify why it is the person's doing business with you in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It doesn't always have to be discounting necessarily. I think that specifically at the highest end of the market, ultra luxury, that's not necessarily the place where you're going to want to push on price as the differentiating factor. But for every one of those situations, there's many, many other situations where the customer does in fact want to perceive value. And I think that price is a very direct mechanism to create value. That's self-evident, but it's not the only mechanism. And I'm glad you're bringing up the fact that the broader customer relationship, which includes price, is in fact what determines value.
Yeah. Value is what it's all about. Yeah. Okay. Where do you think? What predictions do you have in retail, particularly in direct-to-consumer retail? You're seeing brands like Gymshark that have got their pricing right. I have to be honest with you. They have got their pricing right. especially with the target demographic that they have. They're targeting like the under 30s,
Yeah.
19 to 30-year-old demographic, and they've blown up. They're doing maybe $300 million a year. 7-year-old company, started out from a garage, and they're selling gymwear. So I've seen other startups in this space come in, and they were more technical, more Lululemon type technical, and they faced a backlash in terms of like pricing, because they wanted to price higher, and the value was just words. It was just words, and so they have grown, but not as fast. So in the direct consumer space, where there is definitely differentiation from, which is pretty much a marketing play. Many products are alike, to be honest. But there is differentiation. People buy into the brand. They just love there's this emotional layer to it, which clouds every other judgment, or which, gives them a reason to rationalize their purchase regardless of, the price. But the more mass market I'm seeing them, go, obviously I'm seeing price being right. What are your thoughts, or what's your advice to listeners and, this podcast who are in the direct consumer space on how to effectively price, on their pricing strategy moving forward in a post-COVID world?
Yeah.
That's a double barrel.
No,
question,
it's good.
but,
It's a great question. I think the first thing I would say, you're using Gymshark as an example, and that's a great example. So why don't we say to the people at Gymshark, please be thoughtful around your existing customer base and ensuring that you are gathering that you have created the framework to gather the necessary information so that you can utilize data analytics tools, marketing tools, technology tools to really reward and retain your existing customers. That's always your best, the best bet. And so much time and attention is put to new customers or customers who have left. And I think people misunderstand that they should also be spending potentially even more time with the existing good customers that you have. So get your architecture in place to really be thoughtful around generating increasingly personalized customer experience. That would be the first place. Then one of those increasingly personalized customer experiences should, of course, be price. And then that question becomes, how should we start to create differentiated prices based on our on various segments of our customers? I find that when it comes to e-commerce, there's just this implicit assumption that anyone that shows up to my website or my mobile site, whatever it may be, anyone that shows up to my shop, so to speak, is equivalent. I just want to get more of these people. I want to do more of these transactions. And while I understand why revenue growth and customer base growth is obviously critical, it's also important to recognize that these customers are not homogenous necessarily. Some of them can end up being with you as consistent and repeat customers for long periods of time. And those customers are essentially become recurring revenue streams. And as you generate, as you're being thoughtful around how to identify these customers and maximize the number of these much more loyal, consistent customers, I think you're really generating the most enterprise value, rather than chasing this one-off customer that happens to make a purchase relatively, with high sort of marketing costs associated with it, and then doesn't come back. I mean, that's fine, but I think that the idea around targeting the more loyal customer, giving them a differentiated experience, starts with data, having the right data architecture in place, and then goes towards really maximizing the lifetime value of that customer and the perceived value for that customer.
Yeah. So as strategic as your advice is, I'm already sort of seeing applications in email marketing, for instance. So with with e-commerce, personalized email service providers, ESPs like Klaviyo, OmniSend, and the rest of them, you're able to do exactly
Yep.
what you said, which is really segment. So they deeply integrate with e-commerce platforms, and they will categorize, yeah, customer types, based on spend, based on frequency, based on recency, and you're then able to create very specific flows, email flows to those people, and then would you say, big question, this presentation or manipulation, I wouldn't say manipulation, but this presentation of a very dynamic price, not dynamic, a very personalized price to particular segments, would you say it would be best presented on site or with a discount code? How would you execute this, so that customers get the maximum perceived value, or even feel special? Are you going to just give them a discount, or would you actually manipulate? Would you actually change or strike out, use a price strikeout on site? What are your thoughts on that? How would you sort of push the price
That's a great question.
adjustments
I
through?
think there's kind of two dynamics here. The first one is to what degree are you able to track the effectiveness of your scheme? And typically, the code-based programs where you need to input some sort of a code uh, allow you to get a gauge the effectiveness of your scheme quite a bit. You can get sort of click-through rates, and you can get what percentage of people are taking advantage of this offer. So that there is that benefit. The downside of it is that you're sort of putting the burden on your customer to do sort of this is not always true, but if you're not careful, you're asking them to do one more thing. So if the email marketing is done very well, you just click the button and the code is all part of the whole process.
It's all
Yeah,
applied
but
to
so
checkout.
often
Yeah.
that's actually not the case, and there is actually a little section in the checkout process that says, and you have to remember it, and you have to go back to your email, and you really want to be thoughtful around how seamless is this actually going to be. Of course, maximum seamless is to simply do this thing. When Kunle comes to the website, he already gets this price, and we've made this as easy as possible for him. I'm generally an advocate for easier is better. I'm definitely an advocate for, I would argue, and hopefully you agree with me, regardless of whether the commercial experience is e-commerce or even if it were brick and mortar, if you feel like you're actually just getting a different price right off the bat based on who you are, because you've been recognized and you've been thanked essentially at the time of checkout, I think that that's an excellent experience. You'd have to make sure that your checkout process is capable of doing such a thing. But for example, a simple cookie that says customer has purchased before, customer gets a pop-up that says, hey, thanks for coming back, we've knocked $10 off. That's generally a very sort of, the data will show that is very well received by customers. It's no different in the e-commerce sense than it would be in brick and mortar if you were to walk into a store and the person were to say, hey, you're back. Thanks. What can I do for you today? And you say, look, I'm actually here to pick up some socks. And the guy says, you know what? That's great. We'll take care of you today. And at checkout, you have some delightful experience. For example, you bought 3 pairs of socks and were charged for 2. God knows what it might be. Yeah. But that's generally the type of thing where you say, hey, that was excellent. I can't wait to go back and get another thing from these guys.
Absolutely. So in the UK, I think even in the US, because I've seen a few of my visits to the US, there's a coffee chain. It's not really a coffee chain store. It's an organic cafe type, fast food, just organic fast food. It's called Pret-a-Manger, or Pret-a-Manger. So Pret-a-Manger, what they have instituted, I remember when I used to work in the city center, is they empower their baristas or staff to just randomly give people stuff, right? And they have a tab, so they probably have like a £25 per day limit. So what used to happen was I I used to religiously go to Pret a Manger for
Yes.
lunch. This is many years ago. I'll just buy a sandwich or buy what have you and a coffee, and I'll go away. But there's this particular guy who just liked me.
Yes.
Right. And he would quite randomly, like, I expected it, like, and I didn't know the days,
Yeah.
so I'll go there Monday to Friday, and then 1 or 2 days he'd be like, the coffee's
Yes.
on me, or, don't worry about it's all on me. Or here are some sandwiches we're never going to sell. Take it to the
Yes.
office. And, let's say I'd work so hard till about 3 p.m. and I'll just try and want to eat something, and I'll go there and he's like, look, we're not selling these these sandwiches. Take it to your office and, be a good
Yes.
person.
Yes.
Help us get
Yes.
rid of it. And that just got me to subconsciously always go back. And there's a prize element to it. There's a gifting element to it. There's,
Surprise, a positive surprise. We all react really well to that.
positives. Exactly. And obviously I know that, like, my £5 or £10 budget will drop. Essentially, I would not spend what I anticipate to spend a few times a day by going back, and that made a difference. And to this day, when I see him, if I was last time I saw him, I'm like, hello, and there's that affinity with the brand long term. So it's really trying to bring these experiences, into retail, into D2C, into e-commerce, which is what a lot of listeners should think
100%.
about.
That's the main point, I think, of my. We can get very deep into pricing, but at the end of the day, resist the urge to think of your customer base as homogenous. They are not homogenous. There are better and worse customers, and you really want to be thoughtful about how you're going to reward the better customers. My book and today's conversation is around price, but the bigger point is resist the urge to treat your customer base as a homogenous blob.
Okay. Right, Cactus. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Just wrapping up, prize, maximizing customer loyalty through personalized pricing, was out on Amazon UK on February 15th of 2021. There's a Kindle edition and a paperback, I believe. I would link to it in the show notes. If people want to follow you, are you active on any social media platforms?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to take any questions or make any suggestions. I'm not in the consulting business, and I don't charge for advice. I'm just happy to be helpful to other entrepreneurs.
Brilliant. Many thanks for coming on the 2X eCommerce podcast show. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Kunle.